Hey, thanks for being here, and thanks for sticking around. We don't have too much time, but I do want to make sure we have a chance to hear from all of you, and then we can take some audience questions if there's time. But Madsen, I'll start with you because I'm curious for your film, what your writing and archiving process is for a film like this. I mean, you're drawing connections between these very personal, solitary moments, but also being, very online and very connected. There's footage of yourself, but you're clearly bringing in other references too. So I'm just curious how that works for you.
Yeah, I think I'm mostly a writer and an editor when it comes to like making films, and so those are kind of the two areas where everything happens for me. I feel like most of us, story like this, again, like I don't really feel like I make films about stories, but I make films about ideas. Most of the story here is unfolding in the editing process and unfolding in like how images fall together with each other. I mean, this film, like when I edited it, I cut it in 2 weeks and it was done, which was a huge joy because like whatever, working on really long-term projects can be like thankless, and something like this feels like a liberatory process. But I had been collecting this group of footage for a couple of years, so like, for example, like the lecture that I deliver, which is cute because you only know it's me talking if you know who I am. Otherwise, you think it's like a random YouTuber. Was something that I recorded in 2020. So like even though I just kind of put everything together pretty recently, I like to sort of like assemble a bunch of stuff and then just put it away and work on other stuff and then come back to it when I feel ready to come back to it or ready to add something new, like a new conversational node of information to the piece. So I just shot all of this sort of like starscape telescope stuff in February. And then, had these two streams of information, like the lecture and ideas about the lecture, and wanted to put them in conversation with each other. So, I mean, most of something like this comes together in the edit.
But the lecture portion that we hear, that came fairly early for you.
That was
sort
like
of
the first
jumping
thing I
off
did.
point.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
and this really.
And it was really long. It was like an hour long. It was like a very long lecture. Yeah.
Okay.
Lecture.
And this like started for you because you were presumably living in this cabin in the woods.
Oh, I was never in a cabin in the woods.
Okay.
The whole thing is, I mean, like, yeah. The whole thing is constructed, through the edit.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm giving you, like, nuggets of information to be able to, like, piece together a narrative. But, like, none of it is actually, I mean, I was never at a cabin in the woods.
Right.
I was just in my apartment in Flatbush.
Gotcha. You do ketamine or you don't do ketamine?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Sheilah, Dani is not here, but I'm wondering if, to start us off, if you can talk a little bit about your collaborative dynamic, maybe the history behind that a little bit. But I'm also curious, especially for this film, how you see your children fitting into this as well.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, and thank you for having me here. Dani wishes that she could be here as well, but she will be soon. And collaboration. Your question was, how does collaboration work, or?
I guess maybe just a little bit of the background to your collaboration together.
Yeah.
I suppose how that plays out. I mean, I suppose we see that sort of playing out on camera in many ways, but I'm also wondering how you do see your children fitting into this role as well.
Okay. Yeah. Well, briefly, the collaboration began maybe in like 2015. Both of us make work, and Dani was making, like, we were having a conflict or an argument about something, and so the work kind of became a way to work that out, like to like have a place that was not our domestic sphere of conflict, some other kind of imagined or created place. So that was how that kind of came to be, and it ended up being very like well, it's also a place of conflict, but it's also like a place of I don't know, I guess like joy is like or it like kind of like gives something entirely different than all of the kind of like day-to-day kind of machinations, and feels like a place for us to be something else together. So, and in terms of children, I'm just aware there's there's more people to speak, so I'm trying to synthesize. The work that we've made thus far together has always included our daughter, Rose, my bio daughter, and that's always been something that I've felt like she was quite young when we started, collaborating. So she was like maybe 4, and my opinion at the time was like, well, like she's part of our family, so she's in it. We make work, you're part of it. And also like wanting to like make image or to an experience that I don't see imaged in kind of non-cliched ways frequently. And so, but Rose is now 12 and she has like a lot more feelings about how she wants to be presented. I mean, it's like that age when you're all about like, who am I to the outside world? So, I mean, I was just actually like reflecting when I was watching this piece right now. It's like, boy, a lot of this footage is from when Rose was younger, because it's harder to get her to participate, and I think that that's just like part of a kind of evolutionary process. Like I can't tell what will come next. And we're also a foster family right now to a little girl, and her name is Sky. And I think that part of what we do together, like what I was just saying, like the work kind of is a way to like work out our lives in another kind of space. And so it was very challenging to be a foster family, and your kind of the parameters are like you can't use images, like you can't have an image of the child who you're fostering, and but yet everything that we do is like try to make work that uses images to like deal with our lives, or try to kind of process them, I guess. And so the work here has like her voice, and she's in it, but we've like kind of obscured her in ways, but like wanting to like make a way to make connection with this like very important part of our life, and also feeling like a lot of kind of like trepidation about how do you do this right, like what's the right way to do this, like, and which is sort of similar to how it was with Rose, because we continue to get lots of questions about like, is it ethical to like have your daughter be in your work? And it's like, well, so I mean I could continue, but that's good for now.
I'll jump to Courtney, Kim, and Han because each of your films is the result of a collaboration with a family member, your mother. So maybe to start off for each of your films, can you, I guess, talk about how that collaboration came about, what it was like, working with your mother on your own artistic endeavors, and I don't know how that became challenging or not challenging for you.
Sure. Thank you. My mom really wanted to tell this story, and she actually asked me kind of over many years, whether I thought that there was a film in this story, which is actually kind of a much kind of larger story, obviously, and some of the activism involved that actually was sort of taking women from California to Mexico and kind of assuring safe abortion at that time is something we actually know more about than kind of she talks about in the film. But it was interesting because it was last year she was urging me and saying, I think we should record this story. I think this is the time, and I was saying, oh, Ma, you're dramatic, the road's not going anywhere. But she actually she was kind of adamant, and we recorded this interview on Christmas, I think, of this past Christmas. And I went down to Mexico City and was kind of, shooting, sort of testing. And anyways, the process then sped up to finish it. But I would say in terms of working with my mom, I felt that she really, I think, wanted to do this testimonial about her experience, but I think she also felt that it was powerful for me to be the listener to that testimonial, and that changed the nature of something that was simply kind of a political testimonial to something that could be seen as part of family, that an abortion can be part of family.
At what point did you find the visual language for the film? Did that come soon after you decided to make a film, or?
Well, I think that I thought it would be large. I think I thought I was going to go into more of the historical stuff surrounding the story, and I think at some point I decided I just actually wanted her to tell the story, and I think the idea of searching for something that would feel like a home movie or sort of an extension of these photo albums, in some way, would ground it in like a vernacular that was not exactly of its time, but of something that was up for review in the same way that childhood photographs are up for review in some sense. So, yeah.
I guess, thank you. But for my film, I think it was kind of a reflection on the work I had been doing before I made it. I like to call it my mom art era, where I was just making a lot of works and films relating to my relationship with my mother and my experiences with trying to understand, I guess, my place within, I guess, both our relationship together, but also, I guess, navigating my own personhood. But then I started to realize that I felt like my mother became an object in my work in a way that I needed to reflect on. And the reason why I felt motivated to make the film and to center her was because I felt like I didn't give her the space to be her own person while I was navigating my own personhood. So in the collaboration, it was very, like, I was writing a lot of the conversation that we had, or that my mother Diana speaks to Princess Diana. But my mother did all the translations, and I do not speak Tagalog. I can only understand it. I can't form sentences, and it was a really beautiful process because it was almost like my mother was lending her own voice and her own words to my own words. So in that way, it was kind of this way to usher in this space for my mother to, I don't know, just be her own person, and to, I guess, navigate what it means to be a woman, a mother, an immigrant, and all, like, the messy ways that it is. But yeah.
So when did Princess Diana come into your film?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I think Princess Diana has always been like a mythological figure to me. And I don't know if like any other immigrant families relate to this, but like my mother she would tell me like, oh, I was named after Princess Diana, like I had the haircut, and it was like this like mythological legend in like my household. And I was wondering that because Princess Diana has been like this like really iconic figure in the same way that I had almost projected an image of my mother, that I wanted to tell this story through like this figure that my mother has known throughout her life, as a way of kind of stepping away from this huge icon. My mother's an icon, but I just wanted to tell, I guess, my mother's story through the ghost of Princess Diana, because of that specific iconography. Yeah.
So during the first lockdown in 2020, I spent 6 months with my mother, and during lunch, I think it was during springtime, she told me if I had the conditions, I would love to be a filmmaker. And I was so shocked. I think I was just coming back from Chicago. I think it was 1 year after I finished my studies in Chicago in film. And I never knew that she wanted to be a filmmaker, because she's a pharmacist. So she told me that, so when she was still in Saigon, before she escaped to Germany, she was going to university during the day, and in the evening she would take directing classes. And she directed a lot of plays before she left Vietnam. So I was really shocked. And so that was the first thing. And the second thing was, so this story of jumping into the ocean when she was threatened by pirates in Thailand. I've been hearing this story since I'm a teenager, so it's been haunting me. And for many years, and I heard so many different variations of this story. And I felt like learning about the fact that my mother had the aspiration to become a filmmaker, and being haunted by the story, I felt the need to do something about it. And I think in the beginning I didn't quite understand why I had to pursue this project, but it felt like a existential necessity. And so I suggested to my mom that we work together on this project, and it was a lot of fun. She's really funny and adventurous, and it really, just working with her on this, I felt like it changed our relationship, it deepened our relationship, and something new manifested that I can't quite grasp yet. But so this project was first shown at the 12th Berlin Biennale this summer, as a film installation. And I invited my mom to come to the opening. And she was lying there, because we had an installation where people had to lie down and then look at the ceiling to watch the film. And I observed her from the back, where she was lying there watching the film. And it was such a surreal experience to look at her watching the film, and then there's this one moment where both also looking at the screen, watching ourselves jumping into the ocean. So I felt like this film, like the point of departure was my mom's experience, but it goes beyond that, I hope. It's also, I think I wanted to try to find a language where we investigate how we construct reality or memory or imagination. I think the boundary is really fluid. And trying to make sense of an experience, but also how we transmit a story or a memory from one generation to another. And I think this film is an experiment in trying to figure that out. I think I don't have an answer to this, but So I think one of the most challenging parts during the shooting was shooting underwater. And both of my mom and I, we were jumping into the ocean, and it was incredibly cold, like in March in Europe, in Malta. And I think I try to find a way to figure out how not only how our minds memorize things, but our bodies. So it's for me a performance, where both my mom and I perform and try to make sense of things. And when I worked with the editor, we tried to put together both our movements into one movement, so that you can't quite identify who is who. So it's like one movement, it goes down and then up again. And we cut it in such a way so there's it repeats 7 times, but each time there's a slight variation. So it also I think it also relates to how we memorize things. Every time we remember something, we change it. So we try to also do that perform it on a physical level and see how that connects, like mind and body and memory and imagination and the construction of a reality or a fiction.
I guess on that note, I'm curious how this animation sequence figured into it.
my friend and collaborator, Dalena, is here actually. She did this amazing animation. Yeah, as I said in the beginning, like it's the point of departure is my mother's story. But I wanted it to expand it into something bigger than that. So I think there are different elements that come together in this film. It's documentary, fiction. It's also a fairy tale about this dragon egg, but it's also science fiction. So during the pandemic, I was reading a lot about the evolution of whales, and I was just fascinated by how I think it's over the course of 20 million years, they migrated from land to sea, and they had to change their physiological functions in order to be able to breathe underwater. So when my mother told me about the story of jumping onto the ocean, she said one of the most miraculous thing was that she felt like she could breathe and see underwater, like an animal that lives underwater. And I thought I wanted to connect that, and I wanted to not only look at migration on a human level or during the lifespan of a human, but like more than that, like 100 years, 1,000 years, 100 million years, like atoms, neurons, humans, animals, like this whole universe where everything is constantly shifting and moving and changing and migrating from land to sea and back to land. And so I wrote to Dalena, and we both share a similar history. Her father was also a boat refugee, and our collaboration was based very much on this exchange of personal stories. And she developed this magical being that really embodies all these different stories that we've been exchanging. And it's loosely based on the shape of the human lung. So the basic idea was to transform the human lung that grows out of my mouth into a whale lung. But then I think it's much more complex than that. And I don't want to pin it down to one shape or one meaning, but I hope it expands this experience into something more than just a human experience or my mother's experience, but that it's multi-layered and multidimensional and not limited to our lifespan and our human way of perceiving things. Yeah.
Mackie, your film also brings in a chorus of voices, but I guess to start off, can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with Ada, how you two met, and I guess how you then decided to make a film together?
Yeah, I mean, I love Ada. We met, I think, 2 years ago, and it was in February 2020, so it was right before things kind of like everyone was separated for a long time. So thankful that we met then, and we were familiar with each other's work, and so it was nice to come together. I don't know, sometimes you can just tell that you really connect with someone the first time that you sit down with them, and that was the case with Ada. I think like from the first times that we started talking with each other, we were both having relationships with not feeling the idea of belonging, but in many different places, not just this country. And also both of our families are country folk. Hers in Canton in China, and mine in Saga in Japan. And so we both already had this kind of interesting relationship with plants and farming. But I mean, both of our families, they farmed but didn't make that much money from it. And so some of them, immigrated to the U.S. And at least in my case, my family all moved to the American South, and it was a couple years after internment ended here. And so they were the only Japanese family in the town. And after that, half my family developed agoraphobia, which I'm not sure how many people are familiar with that in here, but it's this fear of leaving your home or going into any public space. So that created this disconnect with our family here in America and our family in Japan. And so I've never been, and we've never been back since then because of that, and because of money too. So we've lost all of our contact with like my cousins and aunts and uncles and whoever. And in Ada's case, she's been to China a couple of times, and we were both talking about, we want to move there, and there's so much, we want to, I don't know, find this thing that is like missing from us, but we feel like is always there. And it's very confusing when we're, I don't know, treated a certain way here, but then we feel this guilt appreciation for our parents or our grandparents moving here. Because I mean, it did take a lot, but there are two. We have completely different perspectives on it, and no place is perfect. Even though there is like, I don't know, in your head this search of a perfect place. But yeah, and so Ada introduced me to the idea of plant propagation, which I had never heard of before. But I was very interested in that idea and how one leaf can be dropped in a cup of water and become its own plant. And so we started relating that to our own experiences and then, our relationship with plants and migration. I don't know if that is...
Yeah, well, so when did these, the children that we see in the film come about? Was that sort of sparked by, Ada's own, like, personal home movies, watching those? Or?
Those actually came in later. Ada's parents sent 15 tapes, like so many, and that was like a quarter of all the ones that they had. And I also had hours of home movie tapes that I was looking at the same time. But I think initially the childhood aspect of it was that we both wanted to completely annihilate the timelines between our childhood, our parents' childhood, our parents at our age, and our age right now, and see if there's a way to have everyone have a conversation at the same time, or have yourself have a conversation with your younger self, and see what are the similarities, or what are the differences, what are the things that have been lost because of time growing up here. And all the child actors, most of them were first-time actors, and they were incredible. And they just completely kept me on my toes, and I think that's the best thing that you could ever ask for when making a piece of art or directing or anything. Just not being able to predict anything and to constantly be, being challenged.